Hey guys, so I think I'm gonna start the workshop. I know probably no one showed up, but I think we'll have the recording so you guys could access it anytime later on. Uh, do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So just a little about myself. I'm Vidit. I'm a product designer focusing on footwear and concept design. Originally from India and been doing shoes for a long time. Uh, but for this workshop, I just wanted to showcase like design thinking in terms of physical product. Um, so one idea you have is like a walker that came out of research and observation and multiple ideation that turn into a product that people can use. So that's physical design thinking, but because you guys are more focused on digital design and experience, there are ways you can incorporate design thinking in your adventure project. Um, so, yeah, what is design thinking? Pretty much, this is the easiest way to understand. You emphasize or you come up with your inspiration or your idea. You define what you're trying to do. You ideate with various tools, which I'm going to explain later, and you prototype to make sure it works. And then you test out your result, and it can go like in a linear way, and you can always go back and forth. So it's ultimately trying to achieve your goal in the best way possible. Um, just to showcase that design thinking is just like every day around us. You guys might have know about the iPod Shuffle, and now everyone just uses Spotify. But there is a similarity between these two, and the design thinking element is the same, which is the element of surprise and discovery. When iPod Shuffle was introduced, it had no screens and it had like the random shuffle option. So people had the element of surprise that they don't know what next music they'll hear. Um, and the element of discovery, that's something Spotify took, and like you have the shuffle option, but not even that. Now you have like discover weekly and so many options to choose from. So it's kind of like thinking about the emotion that you want to bring. That's one part of the design thinking that we experience from everyday life, is like the emotions behind what you're trying to target. So let's talk about the process emphasis. So I kind of wanted to make it interactive, but since there is no one, so anyone in the audience can jump in. Um, so emphasis of your project or your product. So I'm just going to take two examples of Facebook and Instagram. And on the left, you'll see there are like some key items to think in mind while you're emphasizing on your goal. So it's pretty much like it has to be desirable. Uh, it could be broad or specific. So Facebook was a broader goal, which had pretty much posting photos, videos, status, and everything. There was like so much going on, groups and everything. And Instagram was a very specific focus. Goal was like talking through photos, which has now evolved. But these are two examples. So whenever you have a project, you can make it for the broader audience, or just narrow it down to like the single goal. And you can also think about what the medium will bring. So not just the context, like what Facebook as a medium will bring. So it will connect people. It would allow people to be social outside the physical environment. And it's something that exists in the internet. And similarly, Instagram was a medium that they were like, oh, people like to talk through images. So what if there was a medium to talk through images? So it's understanding what you're trying to bring as like a wider scope. And again, who is it for and the emotion behind the goal. So once you understand who are you designing for or focusing on, you can like have a better project once you have like an audience in mind. And last thing is knowing your past. Like there was so many social media platforms even before Facebook, but They understood their history and they evolved from the past experience. When you're defining your goal, let's say your theme is adventure, it's kind of like your mission statement, like so that people know what you're trying to do. And while doing that, you kind of want to make it clear, like, hey, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, or this is the experience I'm trying to achieve. Uh, and your audience here, it's even gets more specific, whether it's like, hey, this is for like 18 to 24 age group, this is for the older audience. Um, and again, like focusing on what the service would do. Uh, and one idea is to start with like a clear statement and noting down the key emotions that people would go through. So maybe let's say designing the app or a game around adventure. So you're like, I want the element of surprise. I want people to experience joy. I want people to experience kind of like failure or like engagement. So you kind of like, once you have your emotions, you can design better or like code better. Uh, and when you're ideating, let's say, because pretty much everything you're trying to do is for the people. Um, so once you have your goal, you can either brainstorm on like sticky notes. And when you're brainstorming, you're like, hey, this is all that could go wrong. Like when you're brainstorming, you're kind of like thinking what could go wrong so that you can focus on the right thing. You could do that through the sticky note exercise. You could do it through interviews. You can talk to people. And the chart you kind of see is pretty much when you're designing or coding, you kind of want to know like the wayfinding, like how people would experience this or navigate, like where the keys should be, what color it should be, where the visually they would navigate. And second, then you'll go on to the language. You're like, are there words people familiar with that make sense to them? And memory is an element where you're like, oh, people have past experiences with these app, can we take elements and bring it into our idea? So it's you're innovating, but you're always taking references from the past. um, and you also think about decision making, what people are trying to accomplish, what if this thing goes wrong, what if we run into this error, can we go back? So it's kind of like micromanaging. So these are some things you can keep in mind when you're designing an app or even a game. Uh, and when you're prototyping, there are like various tools. Like you can make wireframes that I'll show in an example. Sticky note flowchart is the easiest way. You can do that through now Miraboard. And two, three things that are even more important is like user map journey and experience mockup. And I'll elaborate on that. So this is what a basic wireframe would look like, and this was one of the app I was working on. So here, all these screens are like decision making that people would go through. And here I'm using the element of visual. I'm like, how can I save time, or how can I engage people before they're bored within like the 6 seconds of using the app? So you're kind of like, when you're designing, let's say you have like a person sitting next to you who's your audience that is giving you feedback. Because when you're designing, you're like, or coding, everything you're thinking is what is coming to your mind, but sometimes it's important to understand what someone else who has no idea about this project would think. So you get like a better feedback from someone who has no clue about it. um, and this is what like a brainstorming process could look like. So let's say your app or your adventure app is more about like an experience that's they're gonna adventure through camping or something. It could be anything. So you're kind of like going through in here, like blue is like the registration process, the yellow is the onboarding, and then the final session. So it's kind of like, hey, what are the touch points, what are they thinking, how are they going to experience this, what if this goes wrong? So it's kind of like thinking about how people would experience this. That is the goal. And ultimately it has to be visually appealing as well. And one of the resources is like Pinterest. You look at various projects and you take elements and inspiration and you kind of build upon that. So if it's visually engaging, people would be more interested in your idea. um, and at the end, it's just like the goal of design thinking is how you can enhance people's life. It could be through coding an app, it could be a game, it could be any product. But ultimately, once you understand how important people play a role in your process, you're going to have a better project. So, yeah, that was it. And I'm sorry for the noise, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Uh, and oops, yeah, whenever you guys see it, if you have any questions right now, feel free to ask, or share any feedback.
Great presentation, Vidit. Thanks for coming and talking. I was wondering if you can talk about your most recent, if you have like a recent project where you've used the design thinking process, you can talk
Mhm.
about.
I did include the wireframes was from my project, but I think, let me see if I could showcase one project. Uh, so I'll just share through uh, an app me and my friend worked within like 10 days, and it was right when COVID started. Um, and the process was the same. So the discovery was we were trying to understand what was happening. So we were looking at interviews, we were talking to people, and then there was this idea of fear and anxiety among children and adults. Like that was something we were trying to focus on. So we had very two clear emotions, fear and anxiety, and from there our project started. We interviewed various age groups and what they were feeling, what they think about COVID, how they're managing, and we were trying to get insights on the key points of things that were going wrong. And this is also the process. So you'll see various sticky notes, you'll see the user map or user journey on the right, which is user one, user two, and what are they feeling, what are they experiencing, and what are their problems. uh, and you can always do problem solving projects, experience, or like fun, but the process is almost the same. So this is like how we broke it down. The people was like screening and classification. So we realized there was we could bring awareness through an app. So we could screen and classify people. We can add precautions for the community, and we can test and assess, like testing locations, and use that data uh, to kind of tell you what's happening around your community. These are some wireframes. So let me see if I could zoom in. Maybe not. Oh yeah. So you can see I'm trying to see, okay, like awareness, uh, how someone who's like 18-year-old would use this app, someone who's above 50-year-old. And you cannot just design for different audience. You kind of find a common link where, hey, anyone from this to this age can use it. So let me design it for, a holistic environment. And again, this is like problem solving, and you're going back and forth, understanding things that could go wrong, where the button should be, where how much bold your text can affect what you're trying to communicate. And still, it has to be engaging. If it's boring, no one's going to use the app. Um, and this was kind of the experience. So one of the idea was saving time. So here you see, instead of we asking you one by one your symptoms, you can quickly tick 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 tick, like click on and move on to the next step. And here we're trying to educate, like, hey, what does these color means, like if you're infectious or you're recovered. And in this way you could see what's happening around your area, and you can make better and sane decision. Let's say going to a grocery store, maybe not near you but somewhere else. um, and again, you can see how visually it's simple and clean so that it's still engaging. um, so yeah, this was one of the ideas where we use design thinking to build an app.
So instead of just targeting one one demographic, it's for these sorts of apps that concern like everyone, you develop or you find a similarity between these demographics.
Yeah, because usually whenever you're designing an app, more people might use like if you're designing it for, let's say, 18 to 24, you cannot control people of 30-year-old to not use it or 45 to not use it. So you kind of figure out like, hey, if I'm focusing on like a young adult, let me have a little focus of, let's say, some young kids using it, some elderly using it. So when I design the interface or the how it looks, it caters towards everyone, but it's still focused on like my main audience, because you cannot neglect people using your app. You cannot be like, oh, it's just going to be used by teenagers. That barely happens. So it's better to have that clarity while you're designing. um, Again, so it could be broad, it could be specific, but it has to be a very holistic approach.
So would those be more focused on if you have some similarity between all these different demographics, even though you still are focused on one demographic? That is, would that be a bigger focus than?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's say if you're designing a dating app and it's catered towards teenager, like 18 and above, or young adult, uh, people around 35, 45 would also try to join it. So when you're designing the interface, it has to be simple for 18-year-old as well as 45-year-old. So you kind of research more towards your audience, but you're like, let me focus a little bit more on the older age group and see if they're inside, like, can I make it easier for them as well? So again, you're focusing on your goal, but you cannot always neglect the other audience. Uh, yeah, any more questions from anyone?
One more thing, if you have the time, I feel like the design thinking process is pretty intuitive. It makes sense, right? Like you need to think about your audience and then build something for them. In your opinion, why do you think that design thinking is like a big thing, like a big realization for people? Like people have this aha moment when they see the design thinking process, but it seems pretty intuitive. So do you think that people just don't forget to think about this part or need to be reminded, or do you think that there's something deeper?
I think it's almost everywhere, because like once you understand it, you can always deconstruct it. Like these AirPods, oops, uh, everyone uses the AirPod, but there's very clear design thinking process of trying to understand like where your thumb interacts in space. So before they came up with this kind of a notch, they probably had like 100 different ideation of understanding, hey, people with big hands, people with a smaller thumb or something, how would it it be easier for everyone to just open these? um, and where does the, like, I remember the first airport having the light outside, and now the second generation had it inside. So that was, again, they were like, hey, maybe we want a cleaner design so that the light is inside. um and again, like thinking about how people would use it, they have this button which is flushed out for pairing, so that nothing is like bulging out. So all these things are design thinking, but when it comes to people, like, it's just airports for them. Like they are not thinking, oh wow, like this is the best, experience for me. It's made in a way which you're already engaging with it without knowing how it's designed. And it's various things. It's like everywhere around you, like this mouse that was designed, it's ergonomic, so it made sure that it would fit various thumb sizes and like people with small hands, big hand. And it was designed in a way where they spend multiple times designing the surface, designing how much embossing it would have. So it's everywhere around you. But once you start learning it, you'll have like a competitive advantage on your product, on your idea, because you're again focusing on like being it successful, but for everyone, not just like one. Like if this mouse was designed just for like people with tiny hands, it won't sell for the broader audience. So design thinking is almost everywhere, but once you start learning and when you start to deconstruct things, it gives you more clarity and then a competitive advantage. And anyone can use it. You don't have to go to design school. It's just like being aware, being observant, and like a good listener can make you appreciate things around you in like a different perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Would a small little notch like that, I understand like the mouse for big hands and small hands, but would a small little notch on the AirPods case, would that make like a good numerical difference?
Because again, like the thing is, yes, you want to make it as simple and clean, but they probably prototyped hundred of times trying to figure out how much like the millimeter distance is the best, how much wide it needs to be, and they're prototyping. Like the first idea is never right, and they had people coming in and trying to open the AirPod and close it so that they understand which is the smoothest experience. So again, it's the experience of like opening and closing. um, so again, like a single notch, they could spend like a month on deciding where that notch is going to be, how big it's going to be, how deep it's going to be. And that's all thinking about people. And even like iPhone, like when they got rid of the physical button, they had to create gestures which would work for everyone. So like again, like opening your notification center and everything, it went through multiple ideation, multiple steps, figuring out if everyone can use iPhone, not just like kids who are used to iPhone, but even like older generations. So a lot of thinking goes through, but when it comes to you, you just think like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. But in reality, it's been developed so much that it makes your experience seamless.
And if no one else has one last question, I have a little thing, but what was I gonna say? It's about the iPhones. Oh yeah, as a design thinker, are you able to tell the difference? Like if you look at a product, could you tell if there was design thinking behind it?
Yeah. Let's say I have this bottle that I really don't like. The cap. So the cap is designed, and like if I'm trying to drink water, like the cap is always like hitting my face, or like I would have to do this or something. But if I was designing it, I would have designed it in a way where I could make it fit so it never hits anyone, or design this loop in a way. So do you see what I'm trying to say? It's now it makes my life easier with just this little idea of this thing not like hanging out. So, and this comes through experience. Like if 10 people use this bottle, and then you take their feedback, you're like, hey, what was your experience? And if 5 of them say, hey, I kind of hate this hanging thing, that's your insight. You're like, oh, okay, my product needs to adapt to their feedback, and maybe I could make it as simple as this. So you kind of focus, like, to your question, like you can understand better and like come up with better ideas if you know design thinking and if you understand people.
That's fun. Yeah, after taking that design thinking class with Ashley, I was like, this is cool. This is really cool.
And there is a lot more. I just showed you the digital process because you guys have the service and the app and the game, but like the physical side of it is like super intense. It goes super deep, and it could be fun as well. It's not always about like always solving the problem. It could be like creating something beautiful and like something that makes you feel good. Or again, like it could be anything. It could be like an iPhone case to like a washing machine, but the process is kind of the same. So yeah, if in future you could take a design thinking class, or if not, just be, be curious about, oh, how things are made or how someone came to it, you can learn a lot and then use it in your future projects.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much
Yep.
for coming out. I really appreciate it. I'll make sure to get this posted on and timestamp and everything, all that good stuff. And
Yep.
I can also, I'll definitely show this to my club as well, because this is something that's, I mean, it's all new, right? So it have this skill, which it's already a big advantage. And especially because I'm looking for internships for people in my club. So to have
Yeah.
this skill on here, is there anything that resources that you could give to learn more about this?
I think there are various books you guys could read. The one I read about, it was designing for how people think. Uh, that was interesting. And it was like even talking about like how Tinder was designed and why it's so successful. How Spotify was designed, why it's so successful. Like there are reasons why some of these apps are so successful. There is a book I'm reading which is interesting called Thinking Inside the Box. And it kind of tells you about how washing machines were designed, how refrigerator, it wasn't just designed how it was evolved with like some simple design thinking. And yeah, there are various books. I could put it in the chat or uh, tell you guys about it. But yeah, but just I would say start with like just being curious, being more observant, uh, and just observe things about you and try to know about them. Just like the airpod, you can know about the airpod all over the internet, how it was designed.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. I think I'll take a read for those two books.
Yeah. All right, guys, have a fun weekend and good luck to everyone.
Love you.